Welcome to another episode of 0 to 60. On this episode, I'm finally turning the port injection on. Well, I plan to anyway. I've got to go through two things. I need to connect the earth wire up to the BMS port injection controller, and that's going to get those injectors firing. And I also need to wire in my stage 3 low pressure fuel pump. So let's get straight into it. Now, I did this part without the camera on. I was just a bit too excited. But when I installed the JB4, which was October, I think, I swapped out the original JB4 this come with for the port injection one. I had this earth wire. Now, this earth wire is only running the port injection. I just had that disconnected. So now that I have connected the earth wire, there's going to be power going to the port injection system. Inside, however, is a whole nother story. Let's get in there and I'll give you an update on what's going on. So I've been trying to hide this from the internet for as long as possible, but my car does have a subwoofer in it. Yeah, I'm young at heart. Anyway, one thing I am going to do with this, when this was installed, it has got a power distribution block right there. Now it's got some heavy 4-gauge wire, which is probably massively overkill for this sub, but it's going to be a good point to power my secondary fuel pump from. The wire that is run all through the front of the car is this one here. Now this actually goes into the DME box. The black wire is not used. I've just left it loose in the DME box just in case I ever need to get another power from the DME. From the DME box, I should say. But it runs under the glove box, up the side of the car, under the seat, and pops up just here. And this is actually connected to the yellow wire on the BMS port injection controller, which is the trigger wire for the low pressure fuel pump. So when you do have one of these BMS port injection controllers, you don't need to run a hop switch, which hopefully it should work a little bit better. And I guess it allows the JB4 integration to be a bit more intelligent with how it fires the secondary low pressure fuel pump as well, which might work better. Hopefully we'll know in a day or so. So I've got that wire coming from the JB4, which is the trigger wire, which needs to go into the relay. I had this relay laying around. I know it works. I'm just going to use it. I can't remember what I was using it for. But I've got that there. The relay needs an earth, and these other two wires just here go down to the fuel pump. Actually, I'll just try and show you that quickly. So I've got this off as well, and that is, hopefully you can see that, but just there is the two terminals for the secondary low pressure fuel pump. Okay, so I've actually already done some wiring testing, so I know what I've got to connect. I've got to put a proper inline fuse in there, make it look all pretty, so I'm going to get on with that. So just a quick update, I have the relay mounted there, and I know when the seat comes up, it actually has clearance against the back of the seat. It all looks a bit of a mess right now, but I want to test everything, make sure it all works before I tidy it up. I'll probably wrap it with some Tessa tape or some cable ties or something, just clean it all up. But just so that you can see what's going on, we have the main power coming into the relay from the distribution block. This here is the earth for both the relay and the power steering pump. I'm obsessed with power steering pumps and the fuel pump. This is the earth for the fuel pump and for the relay. We have the trigger wire coming from the BMS port injection controller just there, and the power wire going to the pump just there. And I've just used these waterproof connectors because that's all we had laying around in the shop. And I know it looks a bit messy, but I've just tried to do it without spending any money on wiring, and I've just used old scraps from the toolbox. Okay, so now that the wiring is done, it is just a matter of setting up the JB4. So let's get on to that one. So the wiring's done on the stage 3 fuel pump. From this point on, what I have done, I've actually loaded the BMS hybrid turbo port injection E85 back-end flash. The reason you need to change a back-end flash with this, it needs a fuel scaler that reduces as the port injection starts to work, and it's just so that you basically reduce the load that's being put on the high pressure fuel pump. Okay, so the new map is on the car. Let's start it up. I saw the low pressure fuel pump has primed already, so it should start okay. Okay, now what I'm going to do here, hopefully this works. I'm going to screen record my phone so you can see the other settings that I change along the way. So inside the JB4 control, now keep in mind that with the BMS port injection controller, the JB4 actually controls the port injection controller. It doesn't work on its own. With the AI6 port injection controller, you need to load maps and tweak the maps that are on the controller. We can actually do it all within the JB4 controls. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, we're going to go to settings, the user adjustment settings, and you've got to make sure that your fuel biases are set to 50. That is the default number that the JB4 uses to work out how much fuel to request from the port injection controller. So we leave that at 50. You need to set your fuel open loop down to 0. And just make sure we got all those. I'm not running any boost limits. That info is all fine, so we'll save that one. Then you need to go to water meth. Get the hazard lights to say it's saved. So go to water meth injection menu. You need to make sure that signal scaling is set to 99. Now that's got something to do with the way that the JB4 communicates with the port injection controller. I actually had to have mine set to 99 to get my flex fuel to work. So I know that signal scaling is set to 99. My flex input comes through pin number 2 on the JB4 harness, and I need to scale port injection on flex fuel, which is that one just there. So with that done, we're actually good to go for a drive. Now what I'm going to do, actually I'll change the AFR gauge. No, I'll keep looking at AFR. Leave that on AFR. I'm going to change the intake temp gauge to fuel enrichment. So the JB4 will log when it is manipulating fuel between the DME and the high pressure fuel pump, I assume. But now that we've got it set this way up, the fuel enrichment is basically what you will see when the JB4 is telling the port injection controller to start injecting some fuel. Unfortunately, you can't view with the JB4 gauges the actual port injection working, but you do see it as a meth trace in the logs. So that's how I'm going to check and make sure that we're actually getting port injection working. I can keep an eye on my fuel pressure low, and I should see that maintain above 60 even when everything's cranking. I'm going to go and do the first drive. I'm going to do it in map 1. So we'll do it in map 1, which is 14 or 15 psi. Make sure everything's working in map 1, check all the logs, check everything's safe, then go up to map 2. And if we get good results with there, I'll probably go straight up to map 7, which is where I normally drive this thing. This back-end flash shouldn't be any more aggressive than the standard back-end flash, even though it's for hybrids. So I'm not expecting a power increase right now until we start tweaking this fuel and getting everything working properly. All right, I'm gonna go for a drive. So I've just driving around town getting some temp into the oil. Car feels absolutely exactly the same as it did before. There is no difference at this point in time driving around off boost. I kind of assume that it's gonna be jerky. I don't know. It does seem a bit strange adding fuel on a completely separate system to the engine. Anyway, I'm just coming up to a section where I can load it up. I'm going to load it up in second gear and just see if we get a tickle on the fuel enrichment. And if we do, I'll probably just go straight into a log onto the motorway. So, hold it in second gear. We're in map 1, so we're not going to work the fuel system that much, but I just want to make sure that the fuel enrichment does come up and we're getting some life. Yep, there it is. Okay, I saw 23 on the fuel enrichment gauge then. Fuel enrichment gauge. I'm going to go and do some logs, and we'll have a look at the logs in a few seconds. So I've just pulled in after doing that short log, and I'll screen record this so you can see what I'm looking at. Is that going? Yeah, it is. Okay. So hopefully on your screen you can see now, we have the RPMs in the green line, the boost is the blue line, the two red lines are the high pressure fuel pump and the low pressure fuel pump, and then we have meth, which is the port injection actually working. So let's just have a quick look at what's going on here. So we can see there we've got 14 psi, high pressure fuel pump's at 16 as I start to wind the power on. We haven't got any meth going. The low pressure fuel pump is hovering around 60, 66, 62, 61. And then you can see just here, just to the left of that grey bar, the meth has started pumping and the low pressure fuel pump ramps up to 71. So I'd say around that point here, the secondary pump has actually kicked in. So we're all working. One other thing that you need to check when you're doing this with the JB4 is your fuel trims. So we'll just have a quick look at them. Trims 1, trims 2, and what are they doing? So trims has come down to 6 and 5. So we're running a bit rich on the trims, but at this point in time we're not running much boost, and we've only got the E70 mix in, and the idea of this is to go to E85 and all the boost that we can with the single turbos, stock turbos. Okay, I'm going to go and do a map 2 log, and you'll see me in this car park in a few. So I've just got back from map 2. Map 2 feels insane. It's feeling like a very, very fast car. It's weird. I'd say the extra fuel is making it drive better. I'm just going to show you what we're looking at here. So I've got the same view up that you saw about 10 minutes ago, and what I might do, I'll just remove trims because it's just an extra thing to look at, which might be hard to focus on. So what I'm really paying attention to is I want to make sure we've got good fuel pressure and that the port injection is pumping the fuel in. So as we wind up the rev range here, we can see that high pressure fuel pumps are in the teens anyway, which is nice and safe. Meth is starting to trace, which is the port injection after the boost has been on for a few seconds, as the RPM gets up around 3,500 RPM. And we're running at 17.5 PSI. If you don't know, map 2 on the JB4 targets 17 to 18 PSI, and I assume it messes with the timing as well because it feels much more aggressive than 15 PSI in map 1. Now you can see as the meth trace ramps in, which is the port injection working, and you can see I'm using 20% of the port injection capacity here. Low pressure is dipping down a bit when we're lower in the rev range. What do we get down to? See, we see a 58, 59, and as we get a little bit higher up in the revs, it kicks up again and it gets up around 70. So that secondary pump is working, but I wouldn't have thought it should be going under 60. But yeah, we're getting heaps of port injection flow, and it looks like it gets up to 25% flow on that graph, up around the 5,000 RPM. And you can see the port injection tapers off as the boost tapers off as well. Sweet, I'm happy with that. Now I just want to have a quick look at trims. I did look at trims while the camera was off, but I'll just show you guys because I have got to make an adjustment. Now with trims, you can see here, as the port injection starts flowing, the trims are just bottoming out. So we have too much fuel at this point in time. Now I think the reason for that is the BMS port injection controller, the algorithm that's programmed into it is probably set up for 500cc injectors, whatever the base kits come with, where I did put 750cc injectors in this, so it is putting in more fuel than it would normally. And I'm also not running fully 85 yet, and I'm also not running that much boost. But I'm going to lower the fuel bias on most of those RPM ranges and just reduce the amount of fuel that's going in. So I'll do that and then do another log. I'll let you know if there's anything interesting in the other log, and then I'm going to go on to map 7. That's my happy place. I'll see you guys in a little while. God, the low end torque is so much smoother. I don't know if it's, I guess the extra fuel will help reduce the chance of timing corrections on strange inputs, but geez, it feels strong. Oh, I like it. So we're back at the shop, and I did quite a few logs then in map 7, and let's have a look and see what they look like. So I'll bring up another log on the screen, hopefully you can see it. I've done a first through third gear pull in map 7, just to sort of load everything up, and paying attention to fuel pressures mainly as the boost and RPMs wind on. We've got good in the teens on the high pressure fuel pump, and low pressure is maintaining above 60 all the way along. That's good, and you can see there as it starts to get into third gear, the port injection flow is at 45 in map 7. So there's a lot of things that the JB4 takes into account when it's trying to calculate how much port injection it needs to pump in, which is why that's getting a bit more in the map 7. I have noticed my trims Although with that trim adjustment on the duty bias down to 40, it has stopped the trims bottoming out, but we can still pull some fuel out. We've still got too much fuel going in there at the moment. So I might make another adjustment or might increase the ethanol content. I'll probably bring it down to 35 and just see how that goes. Let's just check the other log I did, which wasn't first through third. So in this one, trims bottom out completely. Oh, fuel pressure's low. Oh. Okay, on this one, you can see as the boost comes in and the port injection starts to flow, the low pressure fuel pump comes down to 58 psi. Come on, slide along. And then it looks like it actually goes, shit, that's not good. Hits 50 psi. Now I've got a feeling that 50 psi is a fail-safe amount in the JB4. And you can see the port injection, which is the method, the light blue trace, flatlines as it hits the 50 psi. So it actually stops putting the port injection in when we hit 50 psi low pressure fuel. So on that one, the secondary pump has not kicked in. That's not great. I guess I'm going to have to check some wiring, so we'll do that now. But aside from that, the car feels stronger. Like I said, it's getting more fuel, so it's probably going to have less corrections and just run a bit nicer. The low end torque is where I really feel it, and when you wind the power on, it's gone smoother than it was before, where I was expecting it to be less smooth since we've got this extra fuel system. Anyway, I need to get the seats out and see what's going on with that secondary pump. Make sure I haven't blown a fuse or something. Hopefully you can see what's going on here, but I've just done basic, made sure that we're getting main power for everything. Nothing had come loose. This here is just the trigger wire. So I've disconnected that from the JB4, and if I give that power, that should prime the second pump, and I should hear the relay clicking. The relay clicks. Pump is making... The pump doesn't sound right. The pump squealed then. These Walbro pumps, my main one, you can hardly tell that it's on. I can hear that one from the outside of the car. So I've just opened up the access port to the fuel pump. I've got my mic here, so you guys will hear it if it's... It shouldn't squeak like that. So, if you don't know the full story, the fuel pump that I fitted to this car late last year when I first started running E85 was a really cheap Walbro copy. And when I decided to go the hybrids and the port injection, I bought another one of those cheap Walbro pumps. And it's squealing. That's not good. I'm probably going to end this video off here. Give me 2 seconds. So yeah, it looks like I'm going to have to take that fuel pump out and check exactly what's going on. However, there's no way it should be making a squealing noise like that. So I need to find out what's gone on. It's probably going to be a faulty pump out the box. It's lasted an hour, where it wasn't even running for an hour. It would have run for 20 seconds. Quality. Anyway, that's what you get when you buy a $35 fuel pump. Not relevant for this video though. One thing I just want to talk about, once you've got the system in and you're maintaining low pressure fuel pressure, it is just a matter of dialing in the fuel bias settings to make sure that your trims are around the 25 mark. If you lower the fuel bias number, that will reduce the amount of fuel that the port injection's flicking in, and then you can get that trim number back closer to 25. That's when you know you're in sort of a sweet spot and it's close to what the ECU thinks is the right amount of fuel being pumped in at that particular time. It's pretty easy running the BMS port injection controller. I did it because this car came with the JB4 and then it all sort of just flowed on through the JB4, but reading about all the different port injection options, there are quite a few bonuses to the way the JB4 works, with a little bit more control and a little bit more involvement in programming the port injection controller. Not programming, but running in the background to make sure it gets the right amount of fuel. There's also a few more safeties with it as well. One other thing I didn't mention, when you load the new back-end flash for the port injection, you can actually select in MHD to cut coils if there's a fuel issue. With the standard ECUs, they will, if there's an issue with the engine, they'll basically turn off a fuel injector, and if you've still got the port injector pumping fuel in, that is a bad thing. So being able to kill the port injection or kill the spark if there's any issues with the engine is a good safety that MHD do provide. Yeah, look, if you've got any questions about setting up your port injection, hit us up below. This is the first one I've done, but it all seems pretty straightforward. And the car pulls like a freight train. I can't wait to wind it up a bit more. Hopefully I have the new pump tomorrow. I'm going to go and order it straight away, and we'll keep tweaking with this car. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. Really appreciate it. We'll catch you on the next one.